Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the discussion. Thanks for joining us in our show tonight. This week, the world has been shocked by the news of several attacks that have been going throughout the world. The world has been watching images in the news about the attacks in Paris, Lebanon, and the long and raw war in Syria. On tonight's show, we will discuss the perspective of several personalities of the international sphere that are eager to tell us what's the future of geopolitics in the world and what's the future of international relations. We received the position of Dr. Adila Kuri, who gave us her perspective on the topic and how this will develop. Let us hear what she has to say.
Good night, everybody. As you have mentioned, the past few days there has been an increase in the deadly news we usually see, specifically because of the sad Paris attacks on Friday that have given rise to a huge debate regarding the way terrorism is seen, the way in which the massacre is being portrayed, and the responses surrounding all of this. Firstly, I would like to make a point about the narratives that have been produced around the events. I do not think that the way news have been released is at all spontaneous. Each narrative pertaining to the Paris attacks has a specific story to tell, and for a specific purpose. For example, shortly after the attacks, several newspapers reported that a Syrian passport was found in one of the crime scenes, publicly alleging that one of the suicide bombers came from Syria. When someone reads this, it is not incoherent for them to think that they, the implicit other, is responsible for the bloody assault. Why is it not unreasonable for us to think that? Because the way in which they are being constructed is equal to think of them as slayers, demented, and the unknown word, terrorists. They are not only terrorists, but expected to be terrorists. Hence, if they find a Syrian passport in one of the crime scenes, our first thought is to relate it to one of the suicide bombers. In this sense, an Egyptian passport was also found, proving enough for some newspapers to declare that one of the suicide bombers came from Egypt. Immediately, the Egyptian government denied such allegations and stated that the passport was from one of the victims and not from one of the perpetrators. But going back to the Syrian passport, there needs to be a lot of skepticism surrounding it. There are a lot of possibilities regarding this finding. Let's say that the passport is in fact from one of the perpetrators. How can we be sure that the attacker did not carry it on purpose? What if there was a pre-established plan to make people think that he was a Syrian? Being him or not, because it has to be added, the obtaining of all Syrian passport is way too easy. This brings me to my second point, the responses. What was the immediate response from France, attacking foreign Islamic State's locations in Raqqa? Personally, I do not think that the response is quite enough. Instead, I find it impulsive. France was so overcast by the tragedy that it thought that the best solution was to demonstrate their force by attacking the Islamic State. But my question is, are they really combating terrorism with that? They are just perpetrating the violent structure that got them there. The problem is way much deeper. I believe that the French government, besides asking what failed in their domestic security to allow those attacks, should be asking itself how was the attack committed, just briefly, who carried it out, where did they come from, what context did they live in to allow the emergence of such an ideology. For example, if, as some media have stated, the perpetrators came from French suburbs, then one of the roots of the problem is there, because it is France itself the one that is allowing those citizens to become suicide bombers. Shouldn't this tragedy against terrorism include that? The inclusion of the so long other that is found at home and that bombs himself, killing the ones that he sees as the oppressors?
It is sad that we couldn't have Dr. Kuri here, but we thank her for her time and her opinions. And there we have it. Is the solution to bomb? Is the solution that the government start to see their suburban citizens? Let us discuss this further and try to find the answer. In the last few years and with the boom of social media, the society has been moved by the media supporting the side that they consider as victims, but they haven't taken in consideration the other. Let us take the Facebook filter case. Within 2 days, most of people around the world have changed their profile picture with this France flag filter But who made the filter for Syria or Lebanon? French General Jean de Gaulle is joining us tonight with an interesting position. Welcome, General.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me. First of all, I would like to agree with Dr. Kuri in the fact that yes, indeed, France is in shock. One never thinks that attacks like this will happen under your territory, but this time, it happened. After the attacks, us, the government, find ourselves in a very delicate position. In one hand, we had the questions from the citizens about what happened, and we need to give them answers, but we were uncertain about what to do. In the other hand, we had the whole tension of the international arena under us, and it's worth mentioning it was nothing but supportive. Thank you so much. After a while, the decision was clear. We had to respond to attacks and show that as a nation we have the power to stand up to a terrorist weapon. Just this time, the victim was Paris. But like Dr. Crew mentioned as well, France is not the only one that has been affected. What about Lebanon and Syria itself? It is time to put a stop to the IS. It is moment to show us and to stand up and firmly say that it's enough. We will not tolerate the actions of so many that hurt so much more. It is moment to firmly say it's enough. We will not take threats from terrorist groups as something light, and we are going to respond. This is not a migration issue anymore. The way IS is attacking is whole different. We have citizens from our nation attacking ourselves, and with this way of acting, it's very possible that the IS attack all other countries in an easier way. So I think it's a question of the whole world to respond toward this. For them, it's about nothing but power. But if they have an army, we have it as well. It's a responsibility to protect our citizens and guarantee them security. And we will take the actions that are necessary in order to fulfill this goal. And we're sure that the best way to fight back is to dismantle the terrorist group. We're not going to allow terror within our society, and we are ready to prepare to end this now. Maybe if actions like this would have been taken before, we wouldn't be sorry the loss of so many.
Is on international security. Former UN representative Hye Gong has an opinion about this conflict and how is it going to develop.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. In my own perspective, I will allege that, the narratives posed by the international community, more specifically from the press and the booming system in the social media, has been open space to dialogue and the awareness of people. I consider, speaking from the United Nations headquarters, that this is what humanity had created. However, it is imperative to notice and embrace how important it is to show it in peaceful manners, the way in which we must act. With all due respect to the general, violence will never lead us to a Pacific international arena, and sorry that I'm attacking your allegations, but I consider that the idea of having a military and violence attacking aware of the situation is a just waste of time and money, because violence against violence will only create more violence. According to the statements made and declared by the Dr. Adila Karim, I consider that the attacks from France against the Islamic State as well worthless and pointless. As a matter of fact, the attacks made by France have been only nothing but increasing this state of Islamophobia in society. Please don't get me wrong, but what I'm trying to state here is that, as a former representative of the United Nations, is that we're just fitting the greed and crave of power. And this anarchic system is nothing but ruining peace and, politically speaking, causing a complete disaster. So to conclude my statement and position, in international politics, unbalanced power constitutes a danger within any state. Therefore, this is not only about having an army able to secure the society, but to, under the arms of military, have more clear oppression of power within the situation taken as an advantage for people to act in the situation of emergency. What we're facing is already war, and the United Nations, in fact, has been trying to act in the most specific matters.
It is true that attacks were terrible in each and every country, but we cannot consider them as isolated acts. For years, the people that performed these attacks were prepared and influenced by the networks and connections of the world they live in. In this case, violence and religious extremism. Dr. Vladislav Azarov is going to explain how these networks and connections work in the people. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you. And good night to all the audience. Well, after the terrible attacks in Lebanon, Syria, and the Middle East, we have to realize the bleeding consequences of this fanaticism and radical views of the war and the freedom. All the situations have social and historical causes which have shaped our current world. So it is important to ask the questions how, why is this happening? The ideas of these radicals of modeling in the name of Allah were set in their minds by the terrorist groups they were in. They were taught to hate Occident and its values. They were not born with these ideas because these ideas were set in their minds by the groups they were in. On the other hand, Occidental society also has shaped ideology and values which contribute to discriminate in these communities. The first ideas of people in this side of the planet, here in Occident, when you mention them Middle East, they think in terrorists, Kalashnikovs, and war. They were thinking the bad guys are those who live in the other side of the planet, in the Middle East. And they are the bad guys, because they are dangerous and probably they carry a bomb in their bodies. region of the West has nations with problems of social and political stability. That's true, but it's very different to teach all inhabitants of these places are terrorists. My point is that all these stereotypes are constructed by the society we live in, which cause mutual content and are shaped by the social context of the society. The political consequences of all the events in these days are really worrying. A possible exit to this situation is possible? Of course. We have to destroy the stereotypes of seeing Arabs as terrorists, and they have to see Occidental society in a more other way. We are different, but we can work together. We can live mutually in a respectful exchange of values without oppression. We have to destroy these stereotypes constructed by our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Axelman. Tonight we have heard the opinions of different experts around the world. We can have peace in the coming months with the parties involved in this conflict find a solutions with. History and social development have a huge role in how this conflict has been developed. And time will lead us to discover the culture of this conflict. Thanks for joining us tonight. Until next time.